object, you know, you might, so that would be, there's no way to develop a rational love or a rational hatred for an animal. Is that fair? That may be what's being gotten at. And then that would be, if that's what's being gotten at, then perhaps a human might respond to the empirical reality of people loving automobiles in the United States of America as being more evidence of cultural illnesses that seem to be quite pervasive. Right? If you can be so confused about the source of your misfortune as to attribute it to an inanimate object, then I'm sorry, you're so alienated. You need to just kind of get real.
There's transference in the psychological term. You transferred the feelings from where it should be to something that has no ability to respond.
That's right. Yeah. I think Sonia's just saying in another way that it seems to be a sign of a psychological infirmity. But this isn't a psychology class, we just go so far, which is refreshing too. We're not wedded to any diagnosis or anything like that. We just point out that reasonably we can evaluate the person's argument, right, on its merits, without having to make an ad hominem attack on the person and saying that he's psychologically defective. Which we try to, well, we don't want to do that as philosophers, that's no good. And then we're just down in the sewer with everyone else. All right, so our hearts may not reach out naturally, but there is a way to rescue, and that's wonderful. There's a way to rescue the neo-Humean argument, and that is through biophilia. That's what that's how Partridge concludes, okay? It's true that our moral sentiments all evolve with respect to persons, but we also evolve feelings of pleasure, and I like to use the contrast of disgust, right? It's just you feel disgust at some things that you encounter that have been done. A clear cut elicits disgust. An island of plastic in the South Pacific, or somewhere there in the Pacific, elicits disgust, right? The oil spill on the surface of the water elicits disgust. And these are not moral evaluations, they are closer to aesthetic evaluations, okay? So perhaps biophilia consists of aesthetic sentiments, right? And not moral sentiments. And biophilia is a function of, is a combination of the work of different aesthetic senses and aesthetic sensibilities, not moral judgments, right? Now that might seem like a fine distinction, and I suppose that in the end we do have obligations. It's just another way to get at the nature of our obligations, right? For a Humean, if we do have obligations to ecological wholes, the nature of those obligations is better described in aesthetic terms than in moral terms. Isn't that interesting? There's still obligations though, so maybe maybe you just can't, there is a moral, right? The Humeans, whether you're saying it as a Humean or some other kind of philosopher, you're saying we ought to protect ecological wholes, right? And so it seems like an odd point to call the sentiments that underpin that non-moral sentiments, because they're concluding with the same claim that we ought to protect ecological wholes. But anyway, if you're a Humean, you can't, you don't have access to direct moral status, okay, in ecological wholes, but you do have access to human feelings of disgust and pleasure, admiration, right? The opposite of disgust when you're in a beautiful old-growth forest or when you're seeing a beautiful view of the sunset, right? You're approving, you're saying, and all that goes with it, right? I'm glad that the Park Service, I'm glad that the federal government set aside this land. I'm glad that they included this in our national park, right? So you're making moral observations on the basis of an aesthetic sensibility of balance. And we're going to return to this, by the way, when we get to virtue ethics. It takes us a long time finally to get to virtue ethics, but there is a strong virtue ethics component in David Hume's work that we would be remiss not to point out too. And so the idea that David Hume offers us an environmental virtue ethic, kind of, in embryo. Obviously, he doesn't write about the environment. That's long before his time. But If he does offer us an environmental ethic, perhaps it's better to characterize it as an environmental virtue ethic, offering us character norms, not offering us action norms. And anyway, so perhaps Collicutt's kind of misguided, but maybe in the end his approach to interpreting Leopold and his approach to constructing a radical environmental ethic still can be rescued. Okay? Right? Through, lo and behold, this concept of biophilia is one way to organize our rescue, right, of the feelings that might undergird a land ethic. Okay? Wonder, delight, serenity, awe, plus humility, fear, reverence. It's not all sunshine and roses, right? When you're stranded in a thunderstorm on the middle of a granite mountain, you know, you're not going to be all sunshine and roses and thinking how beautiful everything is, right? You're going to be in fear. You're going to be terrified. And that's going to increase your reverence and your awe, right, of what's going on in nature. And that's all part of biophilia. So it's not all sunshine and roses and love, though, okay? Biophilic gratification is essential for long-term mental and physical health, all right? Health is a moral norm, okay? So biophilia, even under E.O. Wilson's own understanding of biophilia, it's all about humans, right? It's about human health. Protecting human health for E.O. Wilson includes protecting the health of the entire biotic community, which means we have to protect all of biodiversity, which means we have to have strong protections for endangered species. And we have to invest a lot more money in protecting habitats around the world. That's what E.O. Wilson, that gets back to our corridors, that's part of E.O. Wilson's plan. He recognizes that we can't just vacate the earth. We can't just remove humans from 40% of the earth. That's never going to happen, right? So when he says that we need to dedicate 40% of the earth's terrestrial surface to wildlife habitat, that's what he has in mind. He has habitat corridors in mind. They need to have access to all. That doesn't mean humans are going to be removed. That just means they need to be able to wander over that much of the earth. Some of them, right, to maintain healthy populations of some of these apex predators. That's how much land they need. So anyway, so the idea here is that biophilia, even though it's still anthropocentric, you know, as E.O. Wilson or even under Partridge's reinterpretation of it, it takes us to the very edges, right, almost to the boundaries between, right, kind of the demilitarized zone or something, between the more than anthropocentric and the, right, between the anthro reservation and then the wilderness out there. The concept of health, right, takes us to a concern for all of living communities instead of just human communities. So anyway, so biophilia really just bumps out anthropocentrism so far that it's almost not even anthropocentrism anymore. And it may be here the sentimental underpinning of a Humean environmental ethic. Okay, that's kind of what we're getting to. I know I'm right near the end here. That is the end. Okay, so what's fascinating here, though, is that, you know, biophiliology is a very young science, right? And it's not even self-defined that way. But I suspect there are scientists who are demonstrating all the connections between what the human psyche needs out of the natural world, right, and the existence of biodiversity and the policies that we employ, you know, what we follow when we. Right? There are scientists that are uncovering all of this. But sadly, we're discovering this at a time when the fabric of these communities has been so heavily damaged that you know, it's kind of heartbreaking. But I point out at the bottom that, you know, if our science is advancing so far to include, you know, these very intricate moral obligations wrapped up, you know, in our relationship with ecological wholes, then we're discovering that precisely at a point where our technological sophistication has overrun, right, the technological termite colony, you know, which all of us are enlisted in, has overrun so much of the fabric of life that, you know, and then yet that's the right, that's the ultimate object, it seems to me, is what E.O. Wilson is saying, and what a Humean might say to defend an environmental ethic is that actually the feelings of love that we have for the cool running stream and the salmon runs and the old growth forests are actually older and deeper than the feelings of love that we have for each other, right? They're more important, more meaningful. Right? Think of all the meaning you get from your relationships with non-human entities. And so it's kind of heartbreaking, you know, to look around and think of the wealth of relationships, you know, that have been shredded and torn, right? It's part of our human condition to live that, right? And to recognize that. So anyway, we're moving on now to a neo-Kantian reading of, I've asked you to read Roberta Milstein for Tuesday, and I'm also asking you now just to have a really nice weekend, okay? Thank you for your patience, and I'll see you all on Tuesday. Did you dye your hair recently? Huh? Did you just color your hair? Yeah. It's always been that way? Yeah. I don't know what happened, man. It might be waiting for me. I know it is now because I printed it out. So I might have 2 copies of it waiting for me upstairs. I don't have a printer in my office. That's probably where sometimes I get it mixed up because of that. Because I'll print stuff out and I'll go the next day. Because then I'll have more jobs to do, you know, because my office is on a different floor, so it's kind of a pain to walk all the way over there, but that's where I do all my printing. So I might have 2 copies of it waiting for me there now.
And also, I'm starting to feel like I'm getting a little behind on the readings.
Yeah.
And I have been looking at the syllabus and stuff, but do you think I could just jot down real quick, like, of stuff that I should have to by
So far, we've done a midterm and we've done 2 reading summaries, right? That's it. That's all we've done.
Okay, so this
We've
next
done-
one
we've done a-
is
we've done a summary.
Christopher Stone. Is that what you want me to do?
And that's not due until Thursday.
That's not due until Thursday.
Yeah, because Tuesday I'm asking you to read Roberta Milstein, but I gave everyone that heads up in class just because
We don't
I
have to
know.
respond to it. We'll just read it.
No, you don't have to summarize or respond to the Milstein essay. You just have to read it. It's our one exam. It's our one example of a more. It's our one reply. So it's a rebuttal to kind of saying, you know, look, Collicutt, your reading of Leopold here is just kind of off track. And he's not really as much of a neo-Humean, and he's not the kind of Darwinian that you're making him out to be.
Okay.
So it's kind of an important essay, and I just wanted to get it in right after, you know, we just got through reading Collicutt himself.
Yeah.
And we got through reading the you could call it the majority view of Leopold, you know, just because he's the guy that kind of set up the majority view. Just Collicutt's reading, you know, it's been so influential.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're reading a reply, which to me is a very compelling kind of a reply. I think Milstein's interpretation of Leopold makes a lot more sense than. And then we'll get to this other towering, you know, essay, which I do want you to summarize, which is the Christopher Stone essay.
Okay. So, well, thank you.
Yeah, sure. Tell me your name again.
Jason Riggin.
Jason. Yeah. And I'll be all caught up with grading. You'll get back those 2 summaries and the midterm by Tuesday.
Okay. Well, good.
Okay, Jason. Yeah. See you later.